Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, February 29th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 184 days. The game against Michigan in 275 days. The start of spring practice in 5 days. And we are going to be leaping, get it? Because it's February 29th. All right, yeah. We're going to be leaping right into our show today. I titled it initially Five Freshmen to Watch, and then it was like, well, there's kind of a combination of guys at a few different positions. So it's like 5 positions with freshmen to watch. And I thought, well, that's not a very good title. And then I thought, oh, we're talking about Jeremiah Smith. So good news. I'll just put Jeremiah Smith in the title and everyone will be excited. So there we go. We're going to talk about Jeremiah Smith today. Spoiler alert. He is a freshman that some people at Ohio State are excited about. I'm guessing I do not need to tell an audience of Ohio State fans that. I probably do not also need to tell Tony Gerdeman that. He has followed Ohio State football somewhat closely over the years. Tony, there have been plenty of hyped freshmen coming in. You know, this is not a quarterback. This is not Andy Katzenmoyer. But I think it just feels like the level of excitement around Jeremiah Smith, not just from the fan base, but from people within the program who are in a position to kind of know, like, hey, this guy seems like he's pretty good. It is up there with some of the more anticipated freshman springs.
Some of the reactions from Ohio State fans kind of reminds me of Swifties, actually, in terms of their infatuation and their love of just the idea of Jeremiah Smith. But I think we're all kind of interested because we've heard and seen, frankly, for 2 or 3 years now about him. And, freshman, sophomore in high school, like this, wait till you see this guy. This guy's coming up. He's going to be the next one. And now he's here. And so let's see what he does. And I know I'm almost tired of talking about how we see these freshmen in spring, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, how talked many times about how blown away I was the first time we saw Jackson Smith-Njigba just catching everything his first spring practice before the world imploded in 2020, how he was just incredible. And you knew right then watching him, like, this guy is going to be a star. And he had 10 catches for 49 yards as a true freshman. So, there are glimpses, and then it takes a while before you see the full picture. And with Jeremiah Smith, people are talking like it's not going to take long to see that full picture. It's just going to boot like first page. It's right there, all out for you. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's interesting that there are 2 starting jobs available, as we talked about in the last show, that there is an opportunity to go win a spot. And people are already talking about how he is. You don't give this opportunity. You don't assume a freshman can do it. You don't put that kind of pressure on him. They're kind of doing that. It's being done with Jeremiah Smith. So we will see. You mentioned he's not a quarterback or he's not Andy Katzenmoyer. This is very similar to the Andy Katzenmoyer thing, though, where like he was big time, and maybe like Maurice Clarett as well, where it's just they're known before they've ever done anything at Ohio State, and then as freshmen they lived up to that. So that's a lot for Jeremiah Smith to do, and I know we've talked plenty of times about the 30 catch threshold for freshman receivers. We'll see if he can get there. Carnell Tate had a fantastic freshman year last year and had 19 catches or something like that. So the opportunity is going to be there for him to do more.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be opportunity. Far be it from me to tell you to pump the brakes on this, but I think going into the spring with reasonable expectations is probably going to set you up for a happier spring. He is probably not going to catch, 1,700 yards worth of passes this year, no matter how good he looks on film, no matter how good he looks during the spring. But I think go back and look at the trajectory for like a Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave or Jackson Smith-Njigba or any other true freshman receiver that you've seen in the past that has gone on to have a really spectacular career. Put Marvin Harrison in that group if you want. And there's been a lot of they start to really show up. Sure, he'll probably do something cool in the fourth quarter against Akron. Absolutely. They don't generally against good opposition. They start to show up around mid to late October, early November. Marvin Harrison really showed up in the Rose Bowl more than anything else. So, don't necessarily expect starting day one, but there's certainly something to be intrigued by there. There's plenty to be intrigued by there, and there's certainly a path to the field there as well. So you'll get to see something this year, and the spring and the fall camp are really going to be about finding out how much are you going to get to see. Wide receiver is one of the places where we have seen freshmen get on the field for Ohio State. The next three position groups that we're going to be talking about are other places where we have seen freshmen get on the field before and, in some cases, win starting jobs. Let's talk next about defensive end and Edric Houston. That's a spot where this is a deeper defensive end unit than I think we've seen in a number of years in the past. So it may be a little bit of a tougher path to the field for him, but there is certainly an opportunity there to get on the field this fall and start sort of making a name for himself.
Yeah, I definitely think there's an opportunity, and obviously it starts this spring where I think he's going to get maybe more work than a lot of freshmen do, because when you have Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, you don't necessarily need to work them too much in the spring. So that moves everybody up, including Edric Houston. And you got Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, Mitchell Melton, Joshua Mickens, a redshirt freshman, ahead of him in terms of experience. But with Houston, let's not forget Ryan Day on signing day, when he could finally talk about Edric Houston after leaving the press conference to go talk to Edric Houston and then coming back and getting the signature and then being able to talk about him, said that they think he's an impact player on day one. Now, what does that mean? I mean, to me, when you say that, I'm expecting to see him on the field. But then I think Ryan Day also said that not necessarily knowing if everybody was going to be returning, in terms of JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, because he said this in mid-December and those two announced their returns in like mid-January. So that maybe gets put on hold a little bit, but it's a long season. You're going to be rotating a bunch of guys because you need all of your veterans to be as fresh as possible in January. Now it's no longer just November. It's November, December, January. It's like basically September, October is the preseason, and November, December, January is the essentially the playoffs now. And so that leaves room for a guy like Edric Houston to make an impact for Ohio State. But yeah, we'll get to see him this spring and get to just see when we get to watch those one-on-ones, and maybe we'll get to see 2 or 3 practices this spring. And you chart them and you watch them and you go back and you look, and sometimes guys just jump out at you. And we've seen it before, defensive ends, where guys just like, okay, that guy looks special. And I do remember Mark Givler and Kevin Noon going down to Florida to watch Edric or to Georgia, Buford, Georgia, to watch Edric Houston. And Mark at that point said he hasn't seen any better prospect in the 2024 class than Edric Houston. And Kevin, of course, chimes in. He's like, well, what about Jeremiah Smith? And Mark's like, oh. So that's the kind of level that we're talking about with Edric Houston, where, this was a guy that everybody wanted, Ohio State got. So I'm looking forward to seeing him this spring as well.
So those are 2 guys who I think are, just based on the high school resume alone, you would sort of think, yeah, you maybe have a faster than usual path to the playing field. Another spot where you typically will see if a freshman is going to be a standout, if a freshman is going to earn a starting role. Running back has been one of those places. You have seen that over the years. J.K. Dobbins, obviously, relatively recently. TreVeyon Henderson, even more recently than that. So there is a path for that to happen. I don't know that there's a path for that to happen this year with James Peoples, because you've got TreVeyon Henderson, you've got Quinshon Judkins, you've got Dallin Hayden. I mean, there's plenty of talent on this roster, but it's certainly a position, Tony, where we have seen freshmen get out there and make an impact immediately or make an impact relatively quickly. James Peoples feels like he could be someone who, I'm not expecting him to win the starting job. I'm not expecting him to necessarily be the number 2 running back, but he feels like someone who could get out there and make a bigger impact than people might expect in year 1 with as crowded a room as that is.
Yeah, I mean, we still haven't seen TreVeyon Henderson go through a full season without missing a couple of games. It's maybe his freshman season. So in instances like that, everybody's going to move up a spot. I go back to Ezekiel Elliott carried the ball 30 times as a true freshman in 2013. Demario McCall had 49 in 2016, and that was basically the high watermark. So like in blowouts, there are going to be opportunities, but Dallin Hayden has been very, very patient. So you would expect that he's going to be that third guy. And there aren't a lot of carries for a fourth guy. But again, this is going to be a long season. Also, you're not just going to throw out Dallin Hayden, I think, in the final 8 minutes of a blowout either. You're going to want to get guys some playing time. But I wouldn't, is James Peoples, to me, I think, because of the depth at the running back position, he's a redshirt candidate. I do expect him to play his 4 games, and I expect him to make a mark. But this spring, it'll be interesting to watch in terms of how much does Travion Henderson do? How much do they want Quinshon Judkins doing? Because obviously, this is a new offense, but he's not an inexperienced player. So, and frankly, Dallin Hayden all he's ever done is spring football and fall camp. Like all he's ever done is practice. How much time does he need? But so I think there's going to be some decent work for James Peoples this spring that can then springboard him into something more. But we saw last year with Dallin Hayden, like it's very difficult to get a fourth guy out there, especially if you're trying to redshirt him. And we may see the same thing happening for James Peoples this year.
Yeah, that's kind of the $64,000 question: is do they try to redshirt him? Because then you potentially see 8 carries against Akron, or 10 carries against Rutgers or whoever, but then they don't, you are only playing those 4 games. The real interesting thing is the postseason stuff doesn't count. So then you could have theoretically as many as 5 postseason games, which wouldn't count. So you could play 9 games and redshirt theoretically. That's one of about, it's probably about the 432nd weirdest thing about this upcoming season. But a lot to get used to there. So we'll see how James Peoples starts this spring and where that ultimately ends up leading him to this fall. Another position where we have seen true freshmen go out there and start. Denzel Burke went out there, started as a true freshman day 1 at corner against Minnesota in 2021. We saw J.R. Brown out there start. We saw Jermaine Matthews, I think, get a start, played last year. So, corner is a position where it has happened. There is a lot of talent coming in at the corner position. This is kind of a 3-headed monster of Aaron Scott, Bryce West, Miles Lockhart. I mean, that's a really deep corner room. They would have to have either a remarkable leap forward from one of those guys or really, really bad injury luck at the corner position. We have seen both of those things happen at Ohio State in the corner room over the last few years. So it's definitely not impossible, but I think these are 3 guys who I'm really intrigued to watch and just sort of see what maybe, where they are coming out of the spring.
Yeah, because this is a cornerback room at Ohio State. Like you said, 3 straight years they've had a freshman start at least 1 game. But Tim Walton, the cornerbacks coach, has also recruited that room better now to where it seems like it would be much more difficult for a freshman to make this a 4-year in a row thing, because you do add, as you said, Jermaine Matthews, and you got Calvin Simpson Hunt, you got Lorenzo Styles out of the portal last year. So it's a deeper room, and so like that's going to be much more difficult. I am interested to see what happens in the spring in terms of who is where. They recruited Miles Lockhart to be a nickel corner, so I'm assuming that's where he will be. Bryce West, to me, could end up just about anywhere in the secondary. He could end up outside at corner. I talked to him a year or 2 ago. He said he's mentioned the slot as well. I think he could end up as a free safety, honestly, as well. So I think they're going to get him in there. Obviously, you see where he fits best. I just wonder how much time they give him. I remember Jordan Fuller. I don't know if it was in the spring or fall camp, but he was at corner for like 1 practice and they moved him to safety. Same thing with Christian Bryant from Glenville. Started out as corner and lasted maybe half of camp before he was moved to safety. And so we'll see. One of my favorite things about going to the first practice compared to like the 10th is to see who has moved where. It's like, oh, now Torrance Gibson is with the wide receivers and stuff like that, where it's kind of newsworthy that they've moved guys around. So those 3 guys, again, all very talented. And Aaron Scott, might be this year's version of Jermaine Matthews.
Yeah, and if he is, that would be a real shot in the arm for the Ohio State defense, because you've got a really talented top line at that corner spot already, but you could potentially lose Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun and Jordan Hancock next year. So that would be a big boost for the 2025 Buckeyes. And the last position I want to talk about is really also more of a 2025 positional battle, potentially. We're going to read these names in alphabetical order just so we don't offend anyone. Lincoln Kienholz, Aaron Nolan, Julian Sayin, three very talented quarterbacks that Ohio State coaches are very high on. Pair of true freshman 5 stars. Lincoln Kienholz came in as a high 4-star in the 2023 class. He played more than you maybe would have expected in 2023 as the third string guy, and was really thrust into a very unfair spot in the Cotton Bowl behind an offensive line that was not great. And, in a game he was very clearly not ready to play. I don't know that I'm necessarily expecting him to be in the 2024 quarterback battle, but this feels like this spring might kind of be the start of what might shape up to be the 2025 quarterback battle between these three guys.
Yeah, because we're going to be talking about it. We're going to be measuring it. We're going to be comparing them to each other and like, oh, this is Lincoln Kienholz is leading now. And then in 3 days, like, oh, Aaron Nolan, oh, Julian Sayin on the charge. And think back to last year where from day to day, it was Kyle McCord leading. It was Devin Brown leading. And now we've got like a 2-year head start or a 1-year head start on that sort of thing. And the thing with it already starting now is there's so much ground to gain, to lose from now until whenever. And sometimes it's something as small or as significant as breaking a hand, like Joe Burrow, that determines whether you are the backup or you are the starter at another conference. So just little things at the time, they don't seem so major, that become major because Dwayne Haskins is the guy that goes in instead of Joe Burrow because Burrow was not the backup in 2017 against Michigan. So this spring is the start of that, but anything can happen between now and then to disrupt it. Like, doesn't matter really to me who leads among them out of spring. Lincoln Kienholz, I'm sure, is hoping that it's him because he's been here longer, so he should. And if you're caught by somebody who is a year younger than you in spring, that would be a concern. But again, it's not so much of a thing right now that you can't overcome it during the course of the season, during the course of next spring, and during the course of next fall.
And those three guys, even though Kienholz is a redshirt freshman, this is his first spring camp. So he has a little bit of a head start on those other two guys, but not as much as you might think with it's not a full year, it's half a year. And he did get thrown in a little bit earlier than probably expected, but now has a chance to go through spring. And there's a lot of development, a lot of growth to be seen there. A lot of interesting stuff as you're describing, oh, this guy's in front now. Oh, this guy's in front now. The word you were looking for, Tony, was overreaction. But we can't wait to be overreacting. Less than a week from now, we'll be at Ohio State watching some little spring practice and watching the Buckeyes really kind of kick off that 2024 season prep. Winter workouts wrapping up this week, and then we'll be out there for spring ball starting next Tuesday. A lot of interesting stories to be had, a lot of interesting stuff to watch on this year's team, and a great place to do all of those things is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We're talking about this year's team. We're talking about the NFL Combine going on this week. Mark and Kevin in Indianapolis with lots of coverage out of there. You can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com and, of course, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. We have plenty of coverage from the Combine, plenty of coverage from Ohio State spring football camp starting next week. There's going to be some recruiting news, I'm guessing, coming pretty soon. There's plenty of X's and O's talk as well. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening, and it's all happening at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.